Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. No worries, we can start over. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Call the meeting to order at 6:07, oh, sorry, 6:08 p.m. And Gabriel, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And can we please get roll call?
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Figueroa.
Here.
Commissioner Diaz.
Present.
Alternate Commissioner Gutierrez, absent. Vice Chair Navarrete.
Present.
Chair Beaton.
Present. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to approval of the agenda. At this time, the commission may announce any items being pulled from the agenda or continue to another date or request the moving of an item on the agenda. Do we have any requests from commissioners at this time? Okay, thank you. And do we have anything from staff?
No.
Okay, so can we get a motion to approve the agenda as is?
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. And can we get a second?
I'll second Vice Chair Navarrete's motion.
Thank you. Can we please get roll call?
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner Figueroa.
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Vice Chair Gutierrez. I mean.
Navarrete.
Navarrete.
Aye.
Okay, and then Chair Beaton.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to approval of the minutes. This is for Planning Commission meeting minutes for September 21st, 2022. If everybody got an opportunity to look at the minutes, do you have any changes or recommendations for those minutes for September 21st? Nope. Okay, so can we get a motion to approve the minutes for September 21st, 2022?
Motion to approve minutes as presented.
Thank you. And can we get a second?
I'd second Dr. Figueroa's motion.
Thank you. And can we get roll call?
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Figueroa.
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
Vice Chair Navarrete.
Aye.
Chair Beaton.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to written communications. Do we have anything?
I just wanted, just make an announcement that Eva Lara is here, Planning Commission. I think she's been introduced one time before. but
I think
she's gonna
so. Hi,
join
nice to
us
see
in
you
the
again.
presentation today. And also that alternate Commissioner Gutierrez had mentioned that he would not be able to make it today. He said he had some kind of accident, not sure exactly what it was, but he won't. You want to make sure I let you know.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to public comments on non-agenda items. The public may address the commission on any item of interest to the public that is not on the agenda, but is within the subject matter jurisdiction thereof. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comments at this time? Okay. Thank you. So we're going to move on to reports and requests. Does the commission have any requests for staff at this time?
Or
No? Okay. And does staff have any reports?
Not from staff.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to our non-hearing items. We have 3. First one is historic preservation roles, Planning Commission. Whenever you're ready, staff.
Can you pull up a presentation from the, okay. Thank you, Chair, members of the Plan Commission. This item I presented to you just because I thought it's probably information that you may not have reviewed or had the opportunity to review with staff. But there are some sections of the code that relate to historic preservation that maybe you realize that don't pertain to you, and they do. So that's, can we pull up the presentation? And to full. Okay, thank you. So there are some roles that the Plan Commission has with regards to historic preservation, and I just kind of want to let you know what those are. The way there's the Coachella Municipal Code, and there's a lot of different titles. So most of what the Plan Commission is involved with is related to our zoning ordinance, which is Title 17. But there's also another title, 15, Buildings and Construction, that has a section that relates to the Plan Commission. And so you may not have been aware of it, but it's specifically chapter 15.48, Historic Districts and Sites. And the purpose of that chapter is to preserve areas and specific buildings in the city that reflect elements of its cultural, social, economic, political, architectural, and archaeological history. So you have some role in that. And so we're going to go over what that really means. A lot of times historic sites in the city or buildings are considered, potentially significant if they're older than 50 years. And a lot of times we try to survey buildings in the city to determine if they are significant in that way. The city did conduct a historic resource survey in June of 2006 for the Pueblo Viejo district. So there's a binder that we have at City Hall, and where we had a consultant that reviewed different buildings throughout the city and determined if they were eligible to be listed by the city as historic resources. None were actually listed from that survey, but some of them are eligible. And so the Plan Commission does have a role in this. So there's 2 offices, one at the state level and one with the federal government that is responsible for historic preservation. So one is the California Office of Historic Preservation. And then there's the National Register of Historic Places. And a lot of the historic buildings and structures, a lot of the ways that we treat them, preserve them, a lot of what cities do is utilize the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And so they have guidelines on how to protect those historic resources. Here's a couple pictures. So we have a lot of historic pictures in our archive, which is really good that we have those. And so we have a lot of buildings that are older than 50 years old, right? Some of these are early 1900s, as some of these are shown here. So you can see the Lopez Hardware building that, it looks pretty much the same as it did back then, except on the side, you can see those windows are no longer there. You can see the bank, that's the location of now the Coachella Bar and one of our dispensaries. The bottom, you have City Hall, so it's more than 50 years old. And then you have the bank, which is on Orchard Street and 6th Street. And then you have other buildings, right, that are down the street on 6th Street. And then you can see what's now the Jalisco's restaurant, the fire station. And then at the corner of Grapefruit Boulevard and 6th Street, you have that 2-story building that looks like it's stalled construction. And so it used to once be a cafe. I've also heard it used to be a location as a Masonic lodge for the city before it moved into the Vista Santa Rosa area off of Jackson. And so you could see that building actually used to have a canopy in the front, but very neat photos, and those windows aren't there anymore on the second floor. So historic preservation could be an opportunity for the city to also attract for economic development and attract tourism. And so it's an example, if you've ever been to historic Orange, they have a lot of historic buildings and they try their best to preserve those buildings, and they have walking tours. So there's a lot of people that are interested in historic preservation, and they specifically visit sites in California because of that purpose, right? So that's great to be able to attract those people because they spend money in your city. So if you went to historic Orange, you'll see a freeway sign off the freeway. A lot of times it's those brown signs that you designate a historic resource. If you've ever seen those, it kind of catches your attention, and you know there's probably something special off the freeway. So that's something that historic districts can do when they're designated, and that gets done by those two offices, the state and the National Register. This is one I worked on before coming to Coachella. This was a historic district of different buildings. So a historic district is usually if there's a cluster of historic sites or buildings that contribute to making it a district. And so usually what happens, there's a survey done by a consultant to determine if those buildings are historic and if the district is considered significant. This is something I found in our records, and this is a building that doesn't exist, and it was located by Baguma Park. It actually burnt down. And so it was, if some of you remember, this is back in probably like 2005 or 4 when it did exist, and it burned down in a fire. But luckily we have some photos that actually we're able to go back, and I can show them to you and say that that Adobe house does exist. Now there's the Chelsea Apartments that is located there. So I think we know them as the Cesar Chavez Apartments. So what historic district, as I mentioned, contains a number of historic structures or natural features that have historic architectural, archaeological, or cultural aesthetic significance. And with these kind of characteristics, right? So it may have made a meaningful contribution to the nation, state, or community associated with lives of people, that made a meaningful contribution to the country, to the state, or to the city, exemplifies a particular period of national, state, or local history, embodies distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction. And so a lot of different things that qualify as a historic district that are in our code. So the city council actually has a responsible of designating historic sites and districts, and there's different classifications, as you can see here. Class 1 is the highest, and that would be if it has a lot of historic integrity. And so the city council could choose to designate it as a Class 1 historic site. Those sites can have a plaque. So a lot of times you go to historic buildings or sites, you'll see a plaque in front of it and talk about why it's considered historic. Another is a Class 2 site, and that can also be a plaque site. So it might have significance at a federal, state, local, or county level. And then there's Class 3, or structures or sites constructed before 1945. And if the date of construction couldn't be determined. And then the last one is historic district, which is not a site or a structure, but is a larger geographic boundary that might include a cluster of sites or structures in the city. So what does the Plan Commission do with historic preservation? Well, the city council designates you with the responsibility of being that investigatory body with respect to historic preservation. So if the Plan Commission wants to investigate certain sites or structures, then you're kind of responsible for taking that first action so that the city council could consider. And then the Plan Commission conducts any kind of preliminary surveys or studies or investigations that would be needed to inform the city council. So usually that would be the Plan Commission saying, hey, we'd like to look into this. And I guess as staff, we would look for a historic preservation consultant to do the work. If we have the resources to do that, then we would go ahead and try to figure out how to make that happen. The last one, the Plan Commission can request assistance of an individual, as I mentioned, who has knowledge of historic preservation to be able to investigate some of these properties or buildings or potentially historic district. The other thing that the Plan Commission can do is determine, based on those investigations, if those sites would be marked with a distinctive marker. So for example, it could be a plaque. The other responsibility is initiating proceedings for the designation of historic site or district. So once you've done that investigation, you might think it makes sense to actually designate the historic district or site. So you would make that recommendation and the city council would approve it. And then you also have this responsibility with respect to requests for demolition of potential historic sites. So let's say you initiate a proceeding to investigate a historic site or district. You can order a stay of demolition for 120 days to make sure the site is fully analyzed. And so that all the necessary studies are produced, right? So that if we're looking into a historic site, that someone doesn't come in all of a sudden and demolish the building. And that can actually be extended by the Plan Commission an additional 60 days. And that's pretty much it. Basically, what this was to kind of give you a primer of some of your responsibilities. One of the changes I want to make to the code is to actually directly designate you as the Cultural Heritage Board, because it doesn't physically say that in the municipal code. And so basically you kind of have that role already. It's just not identified. So what that also means is that we could actually be designated as a certified local government. So there are cities that are designated as that, and it's kind of a designation the state gives to you based on certain qualifications that it basically says that you really care about your historic resources, and it allows you to be eligible for state grants for historic preservation, right? So to be able to do all these studies like historic surveys or designated historic district. So the historic district that I showed you before, before I received a grant from the state to actually investigate all the different buildings, do the community outreach, and actually have a document to be able to take to the Plan Commission and City Council. So that's the end of my presentation, but this is really for your information. And if you want more information or have any questions, please let me know.
So on the 120 day, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Kate. Any questions from commissioners at this time?
Yeah, the 120 and the 60 days on the demolition, who determines the outcome of after that time period expires? Is there an oversight committee, or do we do it, or?
No, there's no oversight committee. So I mean, I'm thinking it's based on.
I'll say like a consultant or something.
Yeah, so there would be, this is assuming that you've already taken the action to look into a historic site, right? So you could only request the stay of demolition if before that you already initiated efforts to preserve a site, right, or investigate it. So let's say you do this for a private property and the private property owner, like, oh no, they want to investigate the site. It doesn't mean that the property owner couldn't modify their property, but it does mean that you want to evaluate it, and so that allows you the opportunity to prevent it from being demolished before it's actually fully evaluated. So how that would work, I'm thinking, is if I know you initiated proceedings to investigate a property, and after that you want to initiate a stay of demolition, then I would make sure that you're updated about the investigation that's going on with actual historic nature of the property, and letting you know if 120 days expired. If you want to extend another 60 days, that's going to kind of be my responsibility to inform you about that. But also you can ask me questions about it at the Plan Commission meetings.
So can I make a motion to identify property now, or
Well,
how do we do that?
Yeah. I
Do
think,
we give you a list?
yeah, so probably like would probably be the best way is at the end of the meetings when we go over items is to
include that.
make recommendations to
Mhm.
bring something back to the plan commission.
Okay.
So I just, were you aware that you had some of these roles and responsibilities in the city? I guess my question.
I was not about the historic sites, no. I wasn't sure what the process would look like.
Yeah,
I think we've had that discussion, you gave,
Yeah.
in reference to trying to bring this up and make sure we have something
I think
on the
there's,
books to make sure that we protect some of the historical that
yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for the city, especially in the downtown area, because you have a lot of the pictures I showed you were in downtown Coachella. And those are just generally historic buildings, but then you also have buildings that are related to the history of the farm worker movement, right? And so you can actually have historic districts around that. And so the good thing about that, if you were to have a historic district or just historic structures, specifically the historic district, you can potentially have signs that are on the freeway that point people, hey, there's something special off the freeway that we might want to investigate. And we can program things like plaques and, like tours that allow people to understand the history, right? So
How many buildings do we have that are being preserved?
We don't
We have-
have any.
we have no buildings that are being
Yeah,
preserved.
no.
right now.
We don't have anything on the list, yeah.
Not on the list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there
Interesting.
aren't any that are being preserved at this time.
How can we start a list to see how can we preserve this kind of buildings?
Well, kind of like what I mentioned, if you want to
Mhm.
agendize something, one of the things is it's probably a good time now to do another survey, because the last one was 2006, right? So since that time, there's more buildings that are over 50 years old that we want to look into more. At that time, the study wasn't saying that there's any potentially significant historic buildings, but I kind of question that for some of the 6th Street buildings.
Mhm.
So it's probably good to do another survey. And that survey was only done in the downtown, right? So there's probably other buildings that should be surveyed. What wasn't in there is the building that is on the IAD site that kind of has that Moroccan look to it. But that's kind of a historic building. And so I think there's some more work to be done.
I had a conversation with 2 of the directors in reference specifically to that building. Because I caught wind of it, that they were actually, thinking of knocking it down. I said, I guess I gotta go stand in front of the Caterpillar and make sure.
You're gonna see Commissioner Gonzalez there.
No, I mean, that's probably one of the nicest buildings we have in our city, so we gotta make sure we preserve it. And there's been talks, I just talked to one of the directors recently, the last couple of weeks in reference to that particular building, but we have some ideas and hopefully,
But also,
they'll
I
entertain
think,
the idea.
the other question would be, even if we preserve those buildings, how can we make them appealing to the people, Because one thing is preserving the building, and the other thing is like people have interest to go and take a look at the building.
Well, I think once it's designated historical building, we gotta look for funding, obviously, to
Mhm.
preserve them to its original existence. I mean, so I don't know. I think that there's probably money out there or grants that'll entertain the idea of actually putting them back to the original state.
And
But that's a beautiful building, the
yeah,
IID building.
a question, Gabe. So maybe I should know this, but I'm confused a little bit. But for example, like some of the pictures that you showed, some of the buildings, one of them was Jalisco's. If that would happen to like be on the list where they say, hey, this should be preserved. I mean, it's a business. So what happens once that comes, once that pops up in the survey, like, what do we say to the business owner? Or it just stays as is, or like, how does that even work?
No, so buildings can change. So you can alter buildings a lot of times. And it's really up to the planning commission and city council how they want to structure a program. But really, if you're trying to preserve the building, you could still do modifications, but it should be consistent with like the historic integrity of that building.
Okay.
But you could also choose not to do that too. So it's
Okay.
really up to the planning commission. So you know, there might be buildings that you feel that don't have historic integrity. Like the Lopez Hardware building
Yeah.
probably has a lot, right, in terms of the way the architecture was at the time. The Jalisco's, it might be a building where it's more about how old it is versus if it has architectural integrity.
I think
So we
sites
would-
is a very important one too, because I've had some discussions with some of our leadership in the past in reference to specifically the Veterans Park. The Veterans Park, a lot of people don't know, but that was the epic center for the United Farm Workers movement back in the 70s. So the stories that are there and what actually happened there is significant, and that needs to be recognized. And I think a national recognition would be the ideal scenario where people would come and there could be brochures that present exactly what happened during that time period. But it's something that needs to be told because, you know, I was fortunate enough at a really young age to actually witness some of that stuff myself. So it's pretty incredible stories there.
Yeah, so there's a lot that can be done on this topic. Yeah, the Planning Commission is interested, you know, we could agendize something in the future to talk about, you know, potential opportunities in the city, just to kind of gauge what your interest would be.
Okay.
I have the videos to prove it, which is standing there.
The what? Well, I'm sorry.
I have a video, actually, the
He
family
has
had
proof.
some 8mm, they were sitting in the closet for
Oh, yeah?
50 years, I guess, and then we just got them developed recently. And
That's
Cesar
wonderful.
is standing there in front and some of the family members, and so it's pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of historical stuff at that park.
All right. Any other comments or questions from commissioners at this time on this item? So the way we would move forward, if we wanted to recommend to staff to put this on the agenda possibly in the future so that we can maybe initiate a survey, we would do it at the end, or that would be when we recommend it, or?
Yeah, I think at the end. And,
Okay.
Henry, I don't know if you have any other recommendations. Usually that's what I'm used to.
Yeah, I would recommend that you guys do it at the end, and then just do it as a public hearing notice the next time you guys bring it. Then that way the public
It's
can
on another
also.
channel.
Hi, Henry, we can't hear you, but we see.
You can't hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Oh, okay, sorry. So the way you would do it is, yeah, just wait until the end to add it, and then Gabriel can bring it back as a public hearing item, because I'm sure the public will want some input and also bring some structures that they would want preserved. So right now, I would recommend not making a motion or anything.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you, Henry.
This is just a presentation. Yeah, no action.
Okay, so no action on this. Okay. Really good questions. All right, so moving on to item number 3 of our non-hearing.
We have
items.
a question from one of the
Oh.
interpreters.
Okay,
Go ahead, Andres.
yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move on to item number 3, which is the Pueblo Viejo Downtown Parking Survey and consideration of parking time limits. Whenever you're ready, staff.
Okay. Again, Commissioner Gabriel Perez, Development Service Director. This presentation is going to be started off by Eva Lara, our planning technician.
So this item will.
Oh.
Okay. All right, so this item, well, the parking study that we did was actually brought upon a local small business owner that's interested in potential time restricted parking here on 6th Street. So the study was conducted to evaluate if the time restricted parking is warranted to manage our parking demands as the Pueblo Viejo develops. And so in order to do that, we revisited the 2019 Pueblo Viejo parking study in order to analyze what we recommended. So in this picture, you can see that what we got from the parking study was this, they structured it in blocks. So we gathered this study within the blocks. So we went around and sort of counted the occupancy that we had. For this study, though, we kind of focused more on the 6th Street between Orchard and Vine Street. So the study was conducted on Monday, September 5th, 2022, in a 2-hour interval between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. So it was like 7 a.m., 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., 3 p.m., and 5 p.m. And then, and we were observing the parking occupancy for on-street and off-street parking. Okay, so this is a picture, or the 2 pictures that we have for the on-street and for the off-street parking that we have here in our downtown. So. Okay, so for the 6th Street between Orchard and Vine Street, what we saw was that the peak parking occupancy occurred at 9 a.m., which was at 77%. And the lowest parking occupancy was at 7 a.m. at 33%. And technically, we believe this is because obviously at 7 a.m., not a lot of people are driving around. The other one that we are focusing on is a block 6, which is the one we call the library block. And it has a total of 45 parking spaces available. The peak occupancy was around 11 a.m. at 73%, and that's basically because of like lunchtime. And then the lowest occupancy was at 7 a.m. at 16%. And again, because it's morning, it's early morning. The next block that we were focusing on was the Veterans Park back here. And the total parking spaces that we have is 124. The peak occupancy was at 11 a.m. at 35%, and the lowest was at 7 a.m. at 15%. Okay. So.
I'm next.
All right. So these are just photos to kind of show you the areas that we were looking at. The main concern or the main interest by what was raised by Steve Garcia of 6th Street Coffee was that a lot of times this is like the busiest part of downtown, usually during the day. And that's because you have the library, you have a lot of nonprofit organizations, businesses, and so it's quite active, right? And so the parking gets pretty full. The parking gets very full when we have the Mexican consulate here, right? So there's a lot of people that are waiting for their appointments, and so it's probably 100% full at that time. The other is when there's vaccination clinics, like there's like a truck that comes by. And so it does put some stress in this area. So we didn't get to do the survey when we had the Mexican consulate or the vaccination truck. We just did it on a typical day, which would be a busier day, right? We didn't do this on the weekend where we assume it's actually, there's more available parking. But if you could see on this picture, typically there's a couple spaces that are available, but if based on the results of that survey on 6th Street, the peak occupancy at 77% is pretty high. So usually the standard is anything above 80% is really considered full when people kind of, look somewhere else for parking or they leave, right? So at that time, we're getting close to that 80%, but we're probably about 100% with some of those events that happen. And so with businesses like the bakery, or like people dropping off books at the library, or 6th Street Coffee, where people are probably picking up orders. It's really hard when it's occupied either by employees that are parking there all day, or some of the events that happen. And so we think that there's a better way to manage parking. That's kind of our responsibility and why we do these surveys. And how do we manage it, right? One way to manage it could be building a whole new parking lot, which would require a big investment by the city. So before doing something like that, there's probably other things that we can do that don't require a lot of funding, right? And part of that is allowing, creating like time parking, and it would still be free, but it allows people to flow better. So there's still available parking for people that are employees on the north side of 6th Street and on the side streets of Orchard and Vine, where there's plenty of diagonal parking. Here's the employee parking lot. So I did do some surveys of the businesses. So I talked to a few more of these nonprofits after the staff report was written. So we talked to the center, the LGBTQ center, the Desert Recreation District, the Chamber of Commerce, Alianza. What else is there? And we talked to the restaurant that's going to open up, the fire station, or the firehouse, Bill and Bar and Grill. Obviously, we've talked to Steve Garcia, the owner of 6th Street Coffee, the Panaderia, Todek, the library. And so there's no one really in opposition to any kind of time restrictions, just that some of them do use parking on 6th Street. So you can see this is the employee parking lot behind the old City Hall. And you can see there's quite a bit of available parking. This was like about 3 o'clock yesterday. And so it's like, well, where are people parking? So I asked the question, I'm like, hey, you guys have a lot of parking. Like, why? Someone mentioned they parked on 6th Street, but the reason why was that there's no shade here, right? So they were parking on 6th Street because there's shade from the trees. So a potential solution here is either to put shade, or we open this up to the public to make more parking available, right? So I think the solution here is probably shade, so that people have their secure parking for the tenants in that building. But so that's something that we can monitor more as we do more parking surveys in the future. So our recommendation is there's 3 ways that I think we could pursue for 6th Street between Vine Street and Orchard. We can actually designate all on-street parking between Vine and Orchard as time restricted. Don't think that's the best thing to do. B is to have time restricted parking in front of the library in 6th Street, and we could also do that in front of the bakery. Though when we talked to the bakery, I think they mentioned that because they're at the corner, there's still a lot of the diagonal parking that's very close to them, so they weren't as concerned about that.
Yeah.
So even if it was just 2 time restricted parking spaces in front of the library, that could work. After talking to, the other question is going to be, well, how do we enforce this, right? So after talking to our code enforcement manager, they do have some concerns about enforcement, because if people know you don't enforce it, then that can kind of fall apart and the time restrictions won't work. So the other option could be to actually put signs for pickup. And so usually when you know it's for pickup, it's actually easier to monitor that, right? Because you're really going to see that people are in and out. With that, there would be signage on the street, as well as painting on the curb. So the last option would be all on-street parking spaces on the south side of 6th Street would be time restricted. But again, I think that would be restricting too much parking. Total parking spaces on that section of the street is 19 spaces. So, 2 or 4 out of 19, I don't think there would be a big impact. So that's the end of my staff report. The last thing I want to mention is that we want to do more of these parking surveys like in the future. We should do them to kind of figure out what the best ways are to allow people to visit the downtown area. to make sure that people aren't seeing everything full, going somewhere else, right? So that will allow us to determine what are the best ways to deal with the parking issues, right? Do we need to buy, a new parking lot for the city? Do we need to do more time restrictions in parking? Other strategies could be private parking lots. The city could actually work on a rental program with them where we make that available for the public, because there's some parking lots, down here on 6th Street that are pretty available for parking during the day. But that's in my presentation. We do have the owner of 6th Street that is here, and he mentioned he would like to answer questions. Yeah.
How about designating a reserve spot for the coffee shop, the tow deck, and then also the Paneria? Designated reserve, 15 minutes, gives them an opportunity to go in there and get their coffee or get their donuts, whatever, and then just move on. One of the other things I was going to mention also is I think that there needs to be a mutual discussion with the CV Unified School District, where we do the public events like the tequila and the other type of events we do at the park, if they could open up their space and utilize that space also for parking, as just mutual parking. But I think that would work. It's just a matter of having that discussion with the district.
Yeah, those are really good ideas, because that's parking that's really available for events that happen in the city. There's another site, like the county site, where they have a lot of parking there, but it just ends up being closed off. But it has so much parking there. If we have an event on the weekend or
It's just a matter
need
of
more
having,
parking, it's already there, right?
yeah, just having that discussion with them and saying that, I think the city takes responsibility to make sure the parking lot's clean after the event, and I think it would work. I mean, I don't know why not. It's part of our city, and there's got to be some type of mutual agreement between both.
Yeah, as far as the restricted parking for business, I think there might be some issues with that being the public parking. Henry, do you have anything to say about that?
There's a reserved parking. I've seen it all the time where people, you drive into a business and it's designated for that specific business,
Yeah,
There's those exist on Cesar Chavez in front of that, where El Capitan is.
Mhm.
There's signage there but that's a private parking lot. So you can't, also those signs are an eyesore when you walk in, drive in that parking lot. They look really bad, like really bad. They're not consistent with anything in the city. Very bad signage, but and they also are not respected. So that goes back to that enforcement piece. So
That's very true. I'm going to agree with Commissioner Figueroa. They are not respected. So, but the city spoke with the bakery, right, and the boutique, and you mentioned that they really didn't have much interest. Like, they didn't say like, oh, we need this parking in front of where our business is to be restricted. They really didn't mention that.
yeah, Tholec doesn't need it because their visits are longer. Actually, they said it's probably like about an hour or sometimes more.
Mhm.
So they didn't need it, but they saw the need for the other businesses that are like 6th Street. Or
Yeah.
people going to the library for quick stops.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any other questions or comments from commissioners on this item?
I want to hear from Steve.
I think my only.
So this isn't a public hearing item, so you could, if he is available, so if you want to allow the opportunity for a member of the public to speak.
So then, so you said in the third option, the one that is the most highly, the one that's the best option is not this side, but the other side of 6th Street would do the redo.
At the most for 4 spaces,
Mhm.
but I think we would be okay with doing 2 spaces, as long as if it wasn't from the library and 6th Street Coffee.
But would it be possible then, because you were gonna split, right? You were gonna do 2 in front of the bakery and the boutique, and then the other 2 in front of the coffee shop. But if they're not interested in it, could you shift those 2 to give them over here to the library and the coffee shop?
We could do that.
Okay.
So this is up for the planning commission. So when we're talking to the city manager, we're like, hey, how should we do this? And
Right.
he recommended that we take this to planning commission.
I think it's got to be fair across the board, any way we do it, just as long as it, we don't piss off the other business owners, everybody's got to, understand that, there's limited space and, that we got to do what we have. The other option is obviously to city's got to look at possibilities of looking at, looking at some of the lots that are available and purchasing them and utilizing them as parking space for now, because it's a mess when we have these events out here. People are just campering to look to park the car somewhere. So people, I'm sure, park far away, have to walk a pretty good distance.
Yeah, and based on moving the 4 on that side, I would just keep it probably to the 2
Mhm.
as either the short term or pickup. But whether it's pickup or 20-minute, it's really kind of what you think.
What if you did 4, 2, 20 or 15-minute, and then 2 like 2-hour?
Well, let's hear from the
Yeah.
owner, see what he's ideas he has, and then
Yeah.
we'll take it from there,
I think being consistent with the parking in our section will be more efficient than 15, 20 minutes. Like the taqueria or the birreria, people that go and eat there, they take more longer to eat, It's not like going to the coffee and just get a coffee with 10, 15 minutes, or going to the bakery, which takes you only 15, 20 minutes. But to the taqueria and the other businesses back there, I think they take longer.
Yeah, that would be a different,
Mhm.
set of rules, I think, different set of rules, because, people sit there for an hour.
But they also have more space.
Yeah,
They have
Yeah.
a lot more space because they
parking
have
in the
that back area. They
They
can
have the
go
corner.
all through here.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that I think, signage will be helpful for public to go and park over there, because everybody wants to park right in front of it.
Where
Or the
they're
business,
shopping.
yeah, exactly. You want to see your car or whatever.
It's a human behavior, man. We want to be right there in the front door.
But it's,
Yeah.
the post office has a 15-minute one, and that one's understandable, but the post office also has an ADU parking right in front,
Mm,
which is, there is no ADU parking on this street.
mhm.
But is it because it's faced around?
You know what? I'm not sure where the nearest one is around.
Excuse
here.
It's around the,
It should
I
be.
I think it's around the corner.
It's in the corner of the
Yeah,
library.
it's in the corner.
It's in the corner, right?
Uh-huh,
So
see.
And so the idea is, if you have the time parking, someone that would normally park there all day would park either on the side street, Orchard and Vine, where
Mhm.
there's a lot more parking
Right.
available. So,
Okay. I think you had a comment.
Yeah, I was just
Commissioner.
gonna say that I think that's a great idea, just that way we get the traffic flowing, and not only will it benefit the business, but I think it's an ample decision that we need to make, just because I know, like you stated, when we have an influx of people come in downtown, and that is a big issue. And if people, because my concern was when people go to the library, like myself, if I wanted to study or things like that, I usually take 2 hours, and there's enough parking on the side to even do that. So to free up some space right in front of the business, I think that would be amazing.
Agreed.
last thing I was gonna say is our code enforcement manager, Renee Rosales, he's available if you have questions for him on the enforcement side.
Good. Okay, I think the commission wanted to allow for the owner, Steve, to come up and maybe provide some of his input or what he's seen. So we'll allow for that to happen at this time.
There we are. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Gabe, for your interest in this, and thank you all for your questions and for your interest in this also. For the business, it is a serious matter. What we've noticed in the past, right, or currently, is that, yeah, parking is an issue. The only thing that I would suggest is, there isn't a lot of parking available, right? Obviously, what I would recommend for my side of, which would be the south side of 6th Street, between Orchard and Vine, would be timed parking on that side only, which gives anything on the north side kind of like, free space, considering that there is businesses on this side too. But that's probably the only thing that I would suggest, just because more so the businesses are on the south side of the street. There's the new restaurant opening up here in the corner soon. They do have everything on the side. We could also probably suggest something there. But considering that 6th Street Coffee, the library is on 6th Street on the south side, there is Tolek. They do have clients. They do see clients that do stay there. I've seen it, right? They park right in front of the shop. They're in there for a couple of hours and they come and, and free up the space. But then there is a bakery. Perhaps, it's not a problem, but I think it's not a problem for them, but I think that they could also benefit from it as well. And that goes for the boutique too. Maybe a couple of time parking and maybe pickup parking. It will definitely help out the business a lot. And it'll just improve the flow of the street. There are a lot of events, happening in the downtown area post-COVID. And so, people find the nearest parking, right? And it just so happens to be in front of a business. I get it. One of the biggest things was getting people to get down and enjoy the downtown area, but there's really not much to enjoy when there's not a lot of businesses to walk into. You have a couple of restaurants, you have the boutique, a bakery and a coffee shop, and these people just want to grab and go. I think Jalisco was talking to one of the owners, or the son of the owner, and he says that most of them is just people grabbing lunch and leaving, so there is still a lot of grab and go. So we want to make sure that those people that are on a lunch hour, could get their food quick, get their coffee quick, get their coffee and their baked goods from the bakery quick, and then head back to work. So those are the only concerns that I have in my suggestions. If you have any questions, I'm here to, hopefully I'm here to represent the rest of the businesses too on 6th Street.
You think 2 spaces is adequate for your space?
I think 2, yeah, minimum at least, right?
Yeah, because we got to be fair about it. We have the library and we have these other businesses.
We do have the library and we do have the other businesses, right? This isn't just for 6th Street Coffee. This is for the library and this is for the other businesses as well. Like I said, most of everything is on the south side of the street, right? You have the library, you have Dodec, the bakery, and 6th Street Coffee. It'll benefit me a lot. Again, the bakery said that they didn't really see a need for it, but I'm sure they could benefit from it as well. It'll also benefit the library as well too, for those just people dropping off, even though their drop off box is in the back of the building. Still, something quick for them would definitely help out. So again, my suggestion is any time parking on the south side of the street, whereas on the north side, it's open and free. But if I had it my way, I'd do Orchard and Vine parking, timed all time. But, it doesn't work like that.
I think 2 is adequate. I think pickup would be the ideal scenario. You want to just pick up your stuff and leave you.
I was gonna ask,
And would it be 15 minutes or 10 minutes?
what was your median? What do you think your median customer stays at 6th
A
Street?
lot of it is grab and go.
Grab and go?
The most of the business there is grab and go.
So 15 minutes adequate?
I would say 15 minutes. Yeah. That is an extended stay. I don't really have, not right now. Right. But we are planning something here in the future for 6th Street Coffee, which would give customers the ability to stay at the shop a lot longer. I'm sure you've all been inside. There's not a lot of seating available, but we're making some changes here soon that'll change that. So it'll kind of help people that are going to stay at the shop and perhaps do work or have meetings to park on the side of the building or behind the library there on 7th Street. It's a beautiful walk too, so why not? But we do have a lot of customers that is grab and go. And so now that we offer a mobile ordering service, this will definitely help them a lot.
Okay. Thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, any additional comments or questions from the commission for staff?
What would be the plan of attack for how to enforce the
Oh, yeah, are we
the
able
actual
to?
time?
We
How
have some,
You might
we
want to hear from Renee, because he's
Yes.
still on the call.
have some
Yeah.
good code enforcement that are good at the pen, and so let's hear it.
He also has a perspective of it.
Unmute
Hi,
yourself.
Renee, you're on mute. I think.
Good day, commissioners. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
So just a suggestion on the staff portion for the enforcement part, if you guys do, if the commission decides to do any type of time parking, that takes additional staff, which would need a parking monitor. Without having a parking monitor, your time setup is not really useful because people don't obey the time signs, I should say. I think maybe the best suggestion is doing a pickup, drop off type of sign. Because obviously having short staff here in the city, it would be a little harder to spend code time staff enforcing 6th Street parking for the few spots that would be designated.
Okay. Thank you.
My question, then the signage, can we make sure they're consistent with all the new signs that you're putting up in the city? Because
Consistency.
The directory signs that you see around. the city?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
I think it makes sense what Renee says. I think that we had to try it and use it pickup. I mean, people know that 15 minutes, that's all you got, so you go in there, get your coffee and leave.
I think it would be easy for code enforcement staff to know if someone's parked there all day, it would be easier to enforce that versus saying that it's 15-minute parking. That's kind of why.
Yeah.
So,
If they know they're gonna be there longer than 15 minutes, or, they're gonna give them a ticket, they're gonna just park somewhere else. So
right.
just gotta get people conditioned to the 15 minutes, I think.
But we could try that and, making
See
sure.
how it plays out.
I think folks will eventually get the point. And then also, how would we try to let people know beforehand? Because when I'm driving and I park, I don't usually look to see, is there a new sign somewhere? So just so that they don't freak out or something.
If there was direction to do something like that, I think we would figure out some way to outreach to the businesses so that they could also let the customers know that there's gonna be time parking. So we'll figure that out. If you have some ideas for that too, we don't want to give tickets to people, but we also want to make sure people are aware before.
Yeah. And we also want to make sure that I think it's important too for that they're bringing this up where, as the owner was mentioning, that some folks want to just stop by, grab something and then leave, but maybe sometimes it can be a little difficult or they're discouraged. They're like, there's no parking, I'm just gonna go somewhere else. So it's important, I think, that as a commission, maybe we provide that support, to our small business community and say, okay, we're willing to do something to provide some assistance. I think the 2 would be really helpful on that side, closer to 6th Street Coffee and then the library to start off, and 15 minutes, I think, would be very helpful for them too. I don't know what the commission thinks. Oh. Renee, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
And the other question, just it'll be 15 minutes, but is it only valid from business hours?
Yes, so it would be, you can determine what those business hours would be. So, I would suggest maybe either 7 to 5 or 8 to 5, and then leave it at that. Because at 7 o'clock, there's not a lot of occupancy, right? But 8 o'clock is when people start coming in businesses, right? That's why we observe low occupancy at 7 o'clock. No one's there yet.
Okay.
So it'd probably be 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and weekends it wouldn't apply. After 5 o'clock, people could park anywhere.
So would not apply on weekends then?
Yeah, we're out at 5 o'clock.
I would say weekends without special events though, because I sit at the coffee shop on Saturdays and I know that it's very busy there. And the library also is open on a Saturday with people. So I think Saturday, like 9 to 5 or something, not your traditional 8 o'clock. But you can't, it has to be consistent, but I would still do Saturdays just because Saturdays downtown are still busy here in the city because the library is a very busy place with events and stuff. So you lose that space to the business because the business is 7 days a week. So for most people, so except for the library is not open on Sundays. So.
And I would suggest to keep it from 7 to 5. Just because when we do have the consul here, I've been out here at 7, and if there's something going on like that, they're already parked. Yeah, even at that time at 7. So I would probably suggest, just to be very consistent, to keep it from 7 to 5, to allow for that time
What time does the coffee shop open?
at 7. Does anybody want to, we've thrown out a lot, but
So I'm gonna throw a motion. So I'm a motion to create 2 pickup 15-minute spots that are valid from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Directly in front of the library and the 6th Street coffee shop. With consistent signage as a new city signage that has been posted, that is being erected up in the city.
Yeah, I'll second Commissioner Figueroa's motion.
Okay.
can we get roll call? Or does
Yes.
anyone have a different motion?
I'll do roll call. Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Figueroa,
Aye.
Commissioner Liad,
Aye.
Vice Chair Navarrete,
Aye.
and Chair Virgen.
Aye,
Motion passes.
thank you. Okay. We are going to move on to item number 4, which is request for a second 12-month time extension for conditional use permit number 321, conditional use permit number 322, and architecture review number 20-03. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you again, Chair and members of the Plan Commission. This item is the second time extension request for Fountainhead Development. This came to you last year, and so they need another time extension because it's expiring October the 14th. This is a shopping center located at the corner of 50th and Cesar Chavez. There was a tentative parcel map or parcel map that was approved by the Plan Commission and was subject to the extension last year, but that map has since recorded. So this project was first approved back in 2008 for the entire center. And then in October 14, 2022, the City Council approved the project. So those expiration dates were October 14, 2021. They got their first time extension. Now they need the second time extension for the CUP and the architectural review. As you know, there is a coffee shop, another coffee shop in the city, and they just opened and it is doing business currently. That's under a separate architectural review, but just want to give you a status, let you know that that has been constructed. This is the original tenant parcel map that was approved that would create future commercial lots. And so that includes the existing Starbucks site, the Aldi site, and the future Panda Express site. And there will be 2 remaining parcels that would be able to develop, as well as the proposed gas station and convenience store. This is a site plan that was originally approved. So CUP 321 relates to a 12-pump fueling station. And then CUP 322 is for alcohol sales related to the mini mart for that fueling station. This site plan has since shifted, right? Remember, there was multi-tenant retail next to the coffee shop. That changed, and I actually changed the rotation here so you can kind of see the whole picture. But now it's just the single tenant Starbucks coffee, Panda Express. You could see on the north side in the Aldi as a supermarket. That's actually currently under construction, and they're doing the foundation work right now. But we do expect the convenience store and the fueling station to submit an application soon. So there is high interest in developing that site pretty soon, and therefore they need the extension of time. This was the architecture for that building. It was contemplated that it was going to be a 7-Eleven at the time. The idea of the Plan Commission was that the architecture would still mimic the Walgreens building and still maintain some of that architecture in the shopping center. So they've been given that direction. And then this was the Starbucks. This is the landscape plan. So you can see a lot of the landscape plan, the common areas has already been installed, but you can see there would be some additional landscaping that would be installed by the future convenience store, mainly along the pedestrian way that would come off of First Street, which has been installed, but the landscaping isn't in yet, and some of the landscaping along First Street. Some of that is in, but some of that will be the responsibility of the convenience store. And so staff does recommend the Plan Commission approve the resolution 2022-23 for the second 12-month time extension. And that would extend it to October 14th, 2023. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Gabe. Okay, does the commission have any comments or questions at this time?
This is the last one on the, and that
Extension?
CUP, extension of the CUP.
We have one more. There's 3 available.
Oh, there's 3.
Mhm.
Okay. So they're interested in building them.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Comments? No. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve. So number one.
Okay, can we get a second?
The second.
And can we get roll call, please?
Commissioner Figueroa,
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Leal,
Aye.
Vice Chair Navarrete,
Aye.
and Chair Vigen.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to our public hearing calendar. We have one item, item number 5. This is for freestanding identification sign. Eberhard Equipment Architecture Review number 22-06 and variance number 22-03. Whenever you're ready.
Commissioners, item should be pretty quick because you heard this at the last meeting. Basically what we did last time for this request, this is for a freestanding identification sign for Eberhard Equipment. And staff had a recommendation for denial, but the Plan Commission did find reason to approve the variance in the architectural review at this site on 54th and Tyler Street, 21-foot sign located here at that location. This is the sign, so they didn't need a variance because they're going to be 21 square feet over the allowable size of the sign face. And so we did prepare, so here's the regulation that it didn't comply with. The allowable sign area is 75 square feet. They would exceed it by 21 feet. So that would be 96 square feet in total. We did prepare a resolution for approval with findings, and so we're presenting this to the Plan Commission for your approval. And we've added some conditions of approval. One of those conditions would require them to ensure that they get the Imperial Irrigation District clearance, because obviously they have some overhead lines over there. And there's also some CVWD conditions. So they asked for some conditions in there because there is some of the drainage tiles underneath. There's an easement there as well. That's the end of my staff report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gabe. Does the commission have any questions before we open up the public hearing? No? Okay, so we'll move on to opening up the public hearing for item number 5. So at this time at 7:15, we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Do we have any public comment on item number 5? Seeing none. Okay, thank you. Okay, so at 7:15, we're 7:16, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. And would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the freestanding identification sign. Eberhard Equipment. Architectural review number 22-03, variance number 22-03.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll go ahead and second the motion.
Okay, and do we have a different motion or can we get roll call? Okay, can we get roll call, please?
Commissioner Figueroa,
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Liad,
Aye.
Vice Chair Navarrete,
Bye.
and Chair Virgen.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our last item, our informational item. And item number 6, development updates.
Just want to give you a few updates. Some of them I mentioned earlier. So the Starbucks just opened this past weekend. And so today we were doing a walk of the landscape improvements. They currently have a temporary certificate occupancy because we haven't finalized all the landscaping in the perimeter areas yet. There are some items that they have to fix. There's supposed to be lighting at the corner for the palm trees and the future art installation that's supposed to go in there. And but most of it looks pretty good. They are refreshing some of the landscaping in front of the Walgreens and the Taco Bell and the McDonald's. One of the things that we were realizing is that the maybe like the landscapers were not maintaining it how it should be. So like a lot of the bougainvilleas, the deer grass were kind of being cut into like little balls. And basically you're supposed to allow it to spread and grow. And so the landscape architect that was walking with us was going to give them some recommendations on how to make sure it really fills out there. So that's good. And if you recall, there's that maintenance agreement we have with the applicant to make sure that the landscaping is really kept up and looks at first class all the time. So so there is the convenience store and gas station. We anticipate there would be an application sometime soon, but we won't be able to say who the tenant is until we get the actual formal application. All these under construction. The Panda Express is in plan check. We do have an application for McDonald's, and I think originally Commissioner Figueroa, you were bringing up this issue a long time ago about the drive-through, and so we've observed it as a problem. Actually, had they not done anything to the drive-through lane, it probably would have backed up some of the traffic going into Starbucks, considering that was going to open, and with all these, it would be a mess. So they are proposing to reconfigure that drive-through. If you've been out there today, you can kind of see what they've done, but they're actually going to do physical improvements to make that work. And I actually think that's going to be a good idea.
So they're eliminating one side of the parking lot, is that what they?
Yeah.
They're gonna remove that entrance, huh?
They do have to remove parking to make that work.
Yeah.
So that's what, but I think it's a better situation, but that's going to come back to the plan commission because they have to amend their CUP.
They have a lot of parking now
Yeah, they got,
between Taco Bell
Yeah.
and these share parking.
I chose to go to Taco Bell than go to McDonald's because the drive-through was really bad.
Because of that.
Pulte and DR Horton, they're developing, all the housing at Mariposa Point. So that's being constructed pretty quickly. You're going to see a new landscape median along Avenue 50. Right now, it's only a partial median in front of La Morada. So that's going to continue all the way to 50th and Calhoun. So the landscape would be pretty nice. We're starting to require landscape lighting around the perimeter landscaping for new subdivisions. So you'll see that for that neighborhood as well as the Sevilla. So they put in their landscaping, but they haven't put in their lighting. One of the other things we're trying to do is make sure that sidewalks are kind of separated from the curb to allow for more opportunities for landscaping on both sides and more shade. So you'll see that with the new subdivisions that you approve, but we think it's going to be a better look for the city.
nice.
Let's see what else. Any other questions on?
Avenue
development?
50, they're gonna not just do slurry seal, right? They're gonna like do the whole resurface of that street, okay?
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of potholes on that.
Yeah.
And then Avenue 53, they're widening that whole road, right?
Yeah.
For the new homes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they did have.
Looks so much better.
Yeah, that's right. Bellissima is going in as well.
Yeah.
Bellissima is one of the older subdivisions that already had an old map on it. So we can't do the same thing with the landscaping on both sides of the sidewalk, but it's going to happen. Sevilla was the newer subdivision, so that's why you see that situation there. Any other questions on new development in the city?
When is the new art installation going on?
It's supposed to be going in soon. They actually had to readjust that structure they made because it wasn't going to be enough to hold the art piece. So they are going to customize that a little bit more.
And they're securing it.
Mhm.
Okay, good.
The Sunline Transit Hub is in plan check right now, so we're hoping that that will be in construction sometime soon. I'm assuming the earliest time is going to be January when they break ground there. But that's another pending project coming to the city that will be.
Nice.
Thank you, Gabe, for those updates.
And one more,
Oh.
so expect the Tripoli development to come back. They did work on some redesigns of the project that I couldn't find in substantial conformance. And so I did tell them that I think it needs to come back to Plan Commission and City Council. So that might come back sometime either at the end of this month or early November.
Thank you. Okay, would this be the appropriate time to ask about the survey for the historical, what is it, historical buildings? Okay, so
Yes,
are
so
we,
yeah, so you could just go ahead and provide Gabriel with direction of what you guys want him to come back with. There isn't gonna be any motion or vote or anything. It's just the planning commission providing him direction.
okay, thank you, Henry. Okay, so I think we all agree we need to see that item so that we can provide further direction. I think it'd be great, like you mentioned, to have another survey, something a little bit more updated, definitely to look into that. So if whatever steps we need to take, if we can start initiating that process, that would be really helpful and bringing it back to the commission at some point.
Yeah, we'll look into that. Some of that requires some funding to do. So
Mhm.
we'll see if we can get either grant funding or if there's other available resources.
Okay, sounds wonderful.
Gabe, I had a question. I don't know if you're the person that oversees parks, but I've had like multiple residents that I know like tell me about the Bagnuma volleyball courts, that the sand's really robust and it's really uncomfortable to play with, even though it's always full, people play, but realistically they come out with like cut up feet, people are playing in socks, so they're trying to avoid that. And some people even outsource to go to Palm Desert to play just because the sand's a little softer. So is there anything we could do to help either make the sand a little bit more plush and malleable so that people stop having to drive way out there to Palm Desert and actually use our courts? Because I remember when it first got there, it was packed every single weekend. But as time goes, sun hardens the sand, and I don't think it's been refreshed since.
Yeah, I'm not in charge of parks, but I'll relay that to the Public Works Director, Maritza Martinez. But I'll share it with you. There's a link where you can report these things online. That's probably good to share with the public as well when these things come up. And so this gets checked every day, and it's something that Maritza is able to respond to pretty quickly.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Do we have anything else from commissioners at this time? Okay, seeing none, we're going to adjourn the meeting at 7:25 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.